Hey guys, if everybody could just make sure that they have their audio muted, that'd be super helpful. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm really excited to have Jason Buehler from Buehler Heating and Air be on this call with me today in this meeting. You know, Jason and I probably met 2 years ago. It's about two, right? 2.5 or
August of 18.
August of 18, where he first reached out to us. And, we started having conversations about branding and what we could maybe do for him. But, Jason, thanks for being here with us today. I really appreciate you taking some time out. I know it's some crazy stuff that's going on. Tell me a little bit about your business, how you started, and, how we kind of got here today.
Sure. So I've been in the air conditioning business since right out of high school, and started off as an installer like a lot of these guys do, and worked my way into service and then into in-home sales. And then I took a job with the Train company as a territory manager for the Train brand. And 5 years into that, I've been through a lot of business training and things like that. And we got into a bad economy in 08 and 09. And a lot of guys that I, really looked up to were in tough positions. So I made the leap and decided to start my own business in 2010, January 2010. And we started Air Source America. We launched it. And at that time, it was an interesting time because the economy still wasn't great, but there was some tax incentives and things like that for people to buy air conditioners. And we came right out of the gate really aggressive as a residential company. And we started with just a couple of trucks and myself, and we worked really, really hard. And, it's been 10 years now, and we've learned a lot through the years, but we're a residential heating and air company, and we focus on just maintenance, service, and replacement. And we really do very little, with construction or anything like that. We want to be a really good source for our homeowners, and we do work a little bit with small business owners as well.
Okay. So you're starting the business up. You're thinking about names, you come up with Air Source America. Well, what happened there, bro? Like, what happened?
Truth is, I was really struggling. I was really struggling with what to do. And there's so many last name heating and airs. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. I want to sound bigger than that. And I started, consulting with some people, and I asked my older brother, and he said, oh, let me get back to you. And he called me back one day and he says, I really like the name Air Source. But if we put America on the back of it, it sounds like you're a much bigger company.
Right.
So we came up with this Air Source America. And I don't know, I just ran with it. I was like, I think that sounds great. And I wanted to portray that we were a big company that you could trust to do business with.
Okay.
So we started with Air Source America. And, we had the logo developed. And like all small businesses, I was like, man, I love it. This is great. This is great. It's got the planet. It's got the red and the blue. It's got the stripes coming around. And I thought anybody that ever wanted to, look at heating and air is going to think, man, that is an awesome logo. And I really believe that. But as soon as I started to advertise, immediately I started to recognize, oh my gosh, this isn't going, like I thought it would. I wasn't getting the response. And within a few months of launching, one of my advertising people came back and he said, hey man, your logo is really cold and it's corporate and it really doesn't sound local at all. And I started kind of getting nervous, like, gosh, maybe he's right,
Well, let's show everybody what it looks like. I'm gonna share my screen and show you what we got here. So there's that awesome
the planet
globe with the red arrows, dude. Like that's pretty cool, right?
There's warm air coming into one side of the planet, but leaving Florida is cold air.
Got it. You know what? I didn't even realize that if you zoom in, that it's really right on Florida. Was that like intentional right there that you were doing that?
They came back and I said, that's perfect. I love it.
This is I guess your first van that you had, right? And then this one here is the second. There's you. Is that correct?
Well, that's the first van right there.
Okay.
And then we had several at the time that we went to this. We updated that Genius logo and we bolded the letters and we added heating and air conditioning so people didn't think that we were flying airplanes or something.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Because heating and cooling specialist didn't stand out enough.
So is that something too that, like, honestly, like, I know we're sort of joking a little bit about, but something that you were hearing from people as far as, I don't know what you do, like, it's not clear to me what you do?
Yes. You can see the shirt that Ryan's got on there. It just said Air Source America. And sometimes, not very often, but sometimes people would comment, they would look at it and they would look at the shirt and they would say, do you fly airplanes or something? And I would just kind of laugh and say, no, it's a heating and air business. And then they would just kind of chuckle and be like, oh, okay, well, yeah. And, it wasn't very clear what we were doing.
You get to the space, you've got this confusion that's going on. And then you say, you know what? The thing that I hear over all the phone calls that I get from people is they remember my last name, right? They remember my name, but they don't remember the name of my company.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me about that. Like, so then you start thinking about that and you start thinking, well, maybe that's something we embrace, right? Maybe that's something for us to think about. But how did you get there? Like, how was that process for you as far as saying to yourself, you know what, even though at that point, you're 8 years into it and you're like, well, I'm doing okay. Like, you guys you were profitable. You were, I don't know if you were growing as fast as you wanted to be growing, but you were, you could have stayed exactly the way you were, but something happened to make you want to, like, say, I think we could do better. So tell me a little bit about, like, what you were feeling with that.
In the back of my mind, I kept going back to the fact that I would be doing a change out for somebody and my van would be parked in their driveway all day long. And we would get to the end and they'd say, hey, Jason, man, you guys have done a great job today. What's the name of your business again? I need to write this check out. And I heard that so many times that it was like nails down a chalkboard every time I heard it. And many times through the years, I thought, gosh, nobody ever forgets my last name. I really should have just used that. But the fear of changing something, that you've been so committed to, and, you've advertised, you've put it on postcards, you've put it on trucks, you've put it everywhere. And in your mind, you think, man, I can't go back on this. But I finally came around and said, maybe I could change it. And I started to have conversations with people about it. And a lot of people said, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. A lot of people that I trusted and that I cared about their opinion. But sometimes you got to be careful with asking too many opinions, because sometimes you might not, hear everything you want to hear.
Right.
So as time went on, I continued to think about it and I started to search a little bit. And there was a couple of, aha moments, if you will. I'd made the decision I was really going to look into rebranding, and I started interviewing a couple of companies locally that I thought could help with it. And they would always say, well, show me some logos that you do like. And I would start Googling stuff. And that's when I found several of your logos. The first one being the Timo's logo.
Okay.
And I, said, hey, I really like this logo. And they said, oh, okay, well, we could, we could try and design something, like that, or we could try and design something like a style like that. And when I got home that evening, I was showing my wife the Timo's logo and some other ones. And she said, well, who did this one? And that was kind of one of those moments where I was like, oh, yeah, you're kind of right. What does it say here at the bottom? So I Googled kick charge. And when I got on your website, there was like this boom, copyright infringement stuff that pops up. And I'm like, well, dang, I definitely don't want to copy one of these. That's the last one you want to copy. But the more that I looked at them, I was like, gosh, I was like really enamored with the branding elements and the fact that you guys weren't just a marketing company. You really, really specialized in bringing brands to life, not just a logo, not just a wrap, a website, authentic copyright for a website, brochures, mailers, all those things. And I was like, gosh, I really messed this up the first time around. You know, if you're going to rebrand and go through all that trouble, you really got to hit a grand slam if you're going to do it a second time.
Right.
And that's what really, you know, got me into really studying your guys' stuff. And that night, I was sitting there on the couch that night, and I got a text from a really good friend of mine who I worked with at Train. And this guy's a really good guy. And his name's Kent Clayton. And Kent texted me that night, and he said, "Hey, Jason, one of my neighbors needs a change out, and I just cannot remember the name of your business. Will you send me your info so I can send it to him?" And I literally, in that moment, I thought, maybe he bumped into one of my guys, you know, drinking a beer, and they told him what I was doing. Like, is he messing with me? Like, this can't be real. So I picked up the phone and I called him, and I said, "Kent," because he's kind of a jokester. I said, "Kent, did you talk to Ryan or something today?" And he said, no, what are you talking about? And I said, "Well, I'm talking about rebranding my business. And you've always, you know, you just sent me a text and said you can't remember the name of it. Like, for heaven's sakes, we worked together for 5 years. You've seen my vans 1,000 times." He's like, "Yeah, I just can't remember it. What's it called again? It's something America or something." And I was like, "It's Air Source America." And he just said, yeah. Send me that info. I got to change out. I know somebody needs to change out. So we did. And that night I looked at my wife and I said, "I've got to do this. Like, I have to do this." And I showed her the little quote on the Kick Charge website that says, "Success in spite of poor branding is not a valid reason to perpetuate it." And I was like, it almost looks like this guy wrote this about us, doesn't it? You know? And we just kind of shared a laugh. And I had made my mind up that I was going to contact you guys that night. And then the next day, I called in and I spoke to, you know, somebody with your onboarding team.
Yeah.
And I found it kind of interesting. I was like, "Hey, this is, you know, I'm interested in talking to you guys." And they said, "Well, you know, we want to, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what's the name of your company. What do you do? What do you specialize in?" And they literally said, "Well, we're going to check you out and we'll get back to you, you know, with what we think and if we think you're a good fit." And the guy hung up the phone, and I thought, man, am I interviewing them or are they interviewing me? And a couple of days, you know, a day or two later, you called. And at that time, we had a really good conversation. And I don't know if you remember exactly. I remember it a lot more. I mean, I know you deal with a lot of companies, but the first thing you said right out of the gate, you said, "Hey, your file came across my desk, and I think that you would be a really good fit for us. But man, Air Source America, that is a mouthful. What do you think about changing the name?" I mean, it was like the first thing out of your mouth. And I just laughed and I said, "Yeah, I'm definitely open to changing it, but I really want to know what your guys' thoughts are, you know, about this." And we talked for a few minutes, and it was a pretty easy conversation. And then I, of course, told you my last name was Buehler, and you weren't sold at the, like, on the spot. You said,
I wasn't.
"I do a lot of last names. I don't know. You know, let me talk to my team and see what they think." And at that time you asked me, "Well, do you have a tagline?" And I said, "Yeah, stay cooler with Buehler." And you were like, "Well, that's pretty good."
Yeah.
And, you know, you called back a couple of days later and you said, "Yeah, my team says we can work with this if this is the route you want to go." But you weren't, even at that point, you were like, you know, "Let's think about this for a few days." You know, you've had a lot of time.
I wanted to make sure that there was a way that we could do it that didn't feel like we were just totally ripping on the movie, you know, and could we make it ownable? We know the name itself is a memorable last name, right? But I wanted to make sure that I could wrap my head around a campaign that would feel ownable to us. Like, you know, it's associated with the movie and everyone gets that, but like, I wanted to make sure that from our perspective, we could almost disassociate it from the movie and just associate the last name with something, with a name that people have heard before, right? And make it ownable for us. And yeah, I'll tell you what, I mean, when we talked about that tagline, that was something that definitely felt like, well, now it makes more sense even, you know what I mean? Now like you tie everything together. And so the funny thing for us too, is like, once we had that tagline that, you know, and it's very rare that someone comes to us and says, "Well, I already have a tagline, right? I already have this thing that will go really good with my name." Because now the tagline for us was almost driving creative. It was almost like, well, like if we're going to go with this idea of stay cooler with Buehler, well, what kind of imagery would go with that idea and that concept? And that really actually, I think, gave us a lot to start with, which a lot of times is, you know, especially like we say in last name brands, there's nothing to start with. Like, how do I associate a last name with heating and air conditioning? You know, it's hard to make those connections between those things. So, you know, we started the process, you and I, right? And then we did research, you know, we looked at what the competitors were doing in your space. And as in the case of most areas, there really wasn't anyone. There's no one in your area that's really branding properly, right? I mean, it's been a year since you did it, so maybe everyone's trying to catch up to you. But like, would you say that was part of it too? There's like nobody really gets it in your space. Nobody's doing stuff like this.
Nobody has a design anywhere near the creativity or anything that what we have now. There are some companies in my town that stand out a little bit, but just not to this degree.
Yeah. So I want to share like the first round of sketches that we did for you and talk a little bit through that process. But like, so we did the research. We looked at what was happening in your space. Colors were something that we were still trying to work through as far as figuring out what colors we thought would work really well in your space. And I think that this was like the first draft that we did for you here. So this is sort of going on the idea, and we got the tagline wrong initially with the Be Cooler with Buehler. I think Stay Cooler is probably better, and that's obviously what we went with. But we had this idea where we thought like a really just not a full body. It's just more about the face of this brand. And we very early on, we had the sketches that were going with the idea of a, you know, a cool guy, like a cool dude with the sunglasses. And when you put the tagline, you know, with that idea, it just felt like it was so much more natural to be doing that. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like it connected it. But like this one didn't make the cut. A was one that I always really liked, and I don't know why that one didn't make the cut, but we wound up really trying to focus a little bit more on B here, which also then didn't eventually didn't make the cut either. So you know, talk me through that too. Like what was it about these that you felt like weren't quite there yet? And then obviously we did another round and we did something different, but like, what were you feeling on these? Cause I really loved A. I was like, A is it. I was like, I really loved that one for sure. But I you know, what were you thinking when we were going through that?
Well, I remember that you liked A, and I was a little bit more fond of B of these two because I just thought he seemed a little bit more like a younger guy. I liked the hair moving. Like it almost looked like the hair would be moving. Mm-hmm. Like if you placed it right on the van, it would almost be like his hair was moving as he was driving down the road.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of cool. And then there were two others, you know, obviously the one that we went with, and then there was the Swan.
So then we had these ones too, where we were just like trying to figure out how it actually might work on the van. So these are some very early concepts of where we thought we might go. We were playing with some patterns on the van too. So we started introducing like some of the these,
which we ended up keeping the patterns.
Yeah, these 60 elements. And I did like this purple one too, because again, there was nobody in your space that was kind of using that purple color. And then and then we have what we arrived at, which changed direction a little bit. And so, you know, we went more towards this look and feel. And then obviously we dialed in the type too. So like the type that we did for you also was not a font. It was something that we built from scratch because we wanted to have something unique. But we arrived at this space, right? So, you know, that process, I remember it. I always tell this story because it's funny to me, but like, you know, we get this approved, and it took a while to get approved because you were like, I don't know, you were worried, right? I mean,
I was definitely worried.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I got texts from you late at night and then like 7 a.m. in the morning, like saying like, oh, I don't know, like, you think this is right, and so like you went through a period of time where you had to wrap your head around the idea, and you had to live in it and be comfortable with it for like a period of time, right? Like tell me about that. Like
I just had a lot of self-doubt about whether or not this was, at first I thought, well, I wasn't expecting this giant head. Like I thought I was going to get a whole body with this, like I wanted a cool guy, not a cool face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a lot that went into it. And really we had the four, that we were really looking at. But from Jump Street, my wife liked this one. And I'm the guy that can tell you, my wife typically knows best when it comes to picking stuff like this. She always has. I mean, whether it's a design or picking out an outfit or picking a color for a house, she's just really good. And when she looked at all four of them, she came back instantly and said, well, I kind of like this one best. And I said, well, why? She goes, well, he looks like he could be a Buehler, And I kind of laughed. I said, okay, well, I'm not really sure about it. And, I think if you remember, this went on for like, I don't know, probably a couple weeks where we were kind of going through these and we weren't really sure. And, the further I got into it, the more confused I was making myself. I don't know why, but that's just kind of my personality. So at some point I kind of broke down. I went back to her and I said, I don't really know, what do you think we should do? And she says, well, I've told you that I like this guy here. And then, I didn't want to accept that. So I started to ask other people, and this is a really funny part. So my brother John is in the air conditioning business, and he's a really smart guy. He's a very talented salesperson. He's a very good business person. He's really talented, and I value his opinion. But sometimes I don't necessarily always want to ask it because it's almost like you don't want to hear the truth sometimes, And my brother will definitely give it to me. So I called him one day and I said, John, I got these designs and I'm all over the board. I don't really know what to do. And he says, well, send them all over to me. I really want to look them over, and I'll call you back in a day or two. So I send all the designs over, and he calls me back and he says, hey man, we really like them all. He said, I've sent these to people that I know. I've sent them all around, and they all seem like good designs. I want to know, like, what are you struggling with? And I said, well, I'm just not really sure. I don't know if I want this big head. I kind of thought I was going to get a body. There was all this stuff going on. And he said, well, man, I got to tell you, Jay, I got on their website and I read Dan's bio, and I read all of his team bios. And he said, man, what in the hell makes you think that you know more about this stuff than they do? At what point are you going to get out of the way and let these people do what they do? You just need to pick one and go with it. And it was kind of like a shot to the side, but he was right. And in that moment, I was like, okay, you're right. I think I've heard enough. So I went home that night and I told my wife what he said, and she laughed and she said, well, I can promise you that the one, that we went with, that she pointed at, she said, that's the one that you're going to love. She goes, you don't even know what you want, but I know what you want. And this guy right here is the one that you're going to love. You'll fall in love with it. You just need some time. So at that point, I called you and said, okay, we need to move forward with this guy that we picked.
And at that point, I was just totally shocked. No, it was good. But I feel like I had approved it 4 weeks earlier. So like I was ready. I had been ready to go. But a lot of times I feel like part of what I have to do is it's partly being a therapist. I'm like a brand therapist. I got to talk the clients through what it is that we're going to be doing, because to a certain extent, because what we do is so different, it feels so unnatural, like it feels like, oh my God, this is so far out there. Like, could we really go that far? Because it's not what anyone else is doing. So as soon as you put in that phrase or that terminology, you're like, well, no one else really brands like that. And why don't they? And now I'm going to do something completely different. So it takes guts. It's like, well, yeah, that's why I'm trying to do something to be really different. But like your instinct is to like, to curl up and say, no, like that's too far. Like we can't do that because nobody else does that. But I want to just share a funny story. Like when we were ready to wrap the vans, right? So everything's all approved. I got all the artwork done. My team finishes everything. We send it to the wrap company. And then you called me that morning and you were like, Dan, like we got to make the head like 10% or 15% smaller. Like the head's too big. And I'm like, Jason, there is no way I'm making that head smaller. We are not making the head smaller. And that's literally like, you're like, I don't know. He's kind of big, the head. Like, does he need to be that big? I'm like, yeah, he's got to be that big, and just relax. Everything is going to be fine. So, you obviously let me do it, right? And then we got it done. And so, you did something also that's very different as far as a brand rollout. So talk to me a little bit about that, because you literally like closed up business on a Friday, and then we launched everything like on a Monday, over the weekend. Like, we did the website launch for you. We did the direct mail letters to all the customers about the change. But like, tell me about that, because not many guys can do it that way. They're either like, if they have too many vans, it's not practical. But you went through a lot of legwork to make sure that we rolled it out like that. So tell about that process.
So just to finish up on the head thing, I wasn't right there for a few weeks. I was just all wound up, and I had to just say, I got to get through this. I was all wound up, and there was just this unbelievable amount of fear that somehow I was going to mess this up, but I got through it. So I wanted to let you know that I think a lot of people go through that. Maybe they hid it more, or maybe they hide it better from you, but I wasn't doing a very good job of hiding it. So what happened was, we got really committed, and I decided that, we were going to start off with a couple of new transits. So I went ahead and bought the transits, and we got the first couple wraps done. And that allowed us to go and get a little bit of photography work done so that we could get the photography stuff to you, start building the website and some brochures and some other stuff. So I had these two transits that were wrapped, and I had them wrapped, I want to say it was like late November. So I had these two wrapped transits that I had like hidden back behind a building by my shop where I didn't want anybody to see them. And I got the two transits done. And as we got closer to what the launch date was, I called the wrap company and said, hey, we're kind of slow right now. Can I bring a couple of my box trucks to you, and we'll get those wrapped? So we set it up over like a 2-week period to get the rest of the trucks wrapped, like the week leading up to the launch date, and then the week after the launch date to get the rest of them wrapped. So we had it planned, and I was obsessing over it quite a bit. I'm a bit of a perfectionist with stuff like this, especially when it comes to my business. We had the launch letter, the rebrand letter ready to go. We had the Facebook page ready to be converted over. And we even had the website, ready to go live. So we credit to your team really for getting all these things together. And if I don't know if you'll recall, but it was really me that held everything up, because I had to get my license updated with the state.
That's right. Yeah, we had a license issue. I forgot about that.
So when I sent it in, I thought, for one reason or another, I thought this was going to turn around pretty quick, and it didn't. It took a couple of weeks. So we had to delay things just a couple weeks. We were targeting like the first or second week of January, and it ended up being February the 4th was a Monday. So we got everything together. I had all the trucks lined up, all but a couple of the trucks were wrapped. We went home on a Friday as Air Source America. And that Friday, we dumped out like 3,000 letters to our existing customers that said, about the rebrand. It was a very well-written letter, had great graphics on it. Your team did a great job with it. That Saturday, we launched the Facebook page. I had some help getting all my Google stuff converted over, changing the name to Buehler Air Conditioning. I remember having a lot of anxiety about, oh, am I going to lose reviews, or what's going to happen? But it went so seamless in retrospect. We were able to do all that and change the name on Google. Your team helped change the name on Yelp, on all these different sites. I also had one of those services like Yext or whatever that has like a couple hundred listings where you can just go in and master change everything one time. So I gave out uniforms that Friday, and I said, hey guys, when you come back in on Friday, we're Buehler or when you come back in on Monday, you're Buehler Air Conditioning, and this is the way we're going to roll. And as a matter of fact, I even had our radio advertising set up to start that Monday. So Monday morning, the Buehler Air Conditioning was starting on the radio, and we were heading to our first calls as Buehler Air Conditioning. Buehler Air Conditioning, uniforms, trucks. Our customers had gotten the letter. Like I think we sent it out on a Thursday. So Friday and Saturday, they were getting the letter, and even Monday. And it was like, we went from one business one week to a brand new business the following week.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long. Like, I can remember being so, wound up about everything. I don't know why, but I had this fear that, like, oh my gosh, like, what if people don't like it? What if people think it's, too cartoony, or what if they just don't take me serious? Like, I had this really serious brand.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized a couple weeks in was, well, I didn't really have a brand. The only people who really knew who we were people that did business with us. And that was something that you and Alyssa had tried to tell me is, Jason, you're really good at air conditioning. You're not going to lose one customer over this. Nobody's going to turn their back and say, oh my gosh, he changed his name. Maybe they're not good at air conditioning anymore. It wasn't that at all. As a matter of fact, it was quite the opposite. Within just a couple of weeks, the fear was gone because everybody loved it. I deep down, I thought people were going to like it, but I just kept questioning myself. And within a few weeks, I could walk into a grocery store and people would look at my shirt and they would say, man, I sure love those Buehler trucks. Man, those things are so cool. And I can remember a couple weeks after everything launched, my life went back to normal because I was so concerned before the brand switch over. I was so concerned. And within a few weeks, everything went back to normal. And it was better than normal because, it was not just an accepted brand. It was a brand that people really, really liked. And I started getting really great feedback. Even my competitors were giving me great feedback, a lot of them. There was a few that were, making comments like, oh man, that's, you sure did spend a lot of money on that. I don't really think you needed to do all that. But a lot of my competitors were very complimentary, and still to this day, I get really nice compliments from good competitors that say, man, you did a really great job with that.
Yeah. So that's important what you said before about like walking into a store and having people see the name and then know who that brand is or connecting the dots. So part of what we also try to talk about is how important that brand recognition is within the local community. So you've got this brand that's rolling through all these neighborhoods. People are seeing it, they're reacting to it, and more importantly, they're actually remembering it. So then when it comes time to do marketing and you start looking at your marketing channels and now, like, do you need to spend as much on SEO? Do you need to spend as much on pay-per-click, or do people now go onto Google and just type in your last name because they already know who to call? So tell me a little bit about that. And we're going to talk in a second about results as far as revenues are concerned. But like, one of the things that I thought was always really great about this story is the fact that ultimately, I mean, I'm going to sort of spoil the secret, but like ultimately we didn't really spend that much more money on marketing or advertising, but we had a revenue increase. So how does that happen then if we didn't increase advertising? Like, so tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I can break it down really simply for our brand. When in 2018, if somebody did a Google search AC repair and a Google local ad pops to the top and it says Air Source America, or it says, I don't want to use any of my competitors' names, but a well-known competitor's name, they're gonna call the one that they know. They're gonna call the one that they've seen. They're gonna call the one that they're familiar with. And that's what we noticed, is that once we had a brand that was easy to recognize and easy to remember, when somebody Googles it and they see Buehler Air Conditioning pop to the top, they say, man, I see those trucks everywhere. That's who I'm going to call.
Right.
And you told me that would happen and I believed you, but gosh, we really got to see the results, in in 2019, we saw the results were really big. And that was only enhanced by radio, by the trucks being seen everywhere. And then of course, having positive reviews and things like that. But the effectiveness of the advertising is tenfold when you have a memorable brand.
Right. Right. And it's not just the advertising. Like, tell me about recruitment, like, because that's a common issue, right? I can't find anybody that wants to work for me. No one wants to work for my company. I can't find technicians. How has that changed as far as what you've had to do for recruitment? Because you've grown. I mean, you were at 12 people or so, or 10 people or so when we started. And I think you're at like 17, 18 now or so. So
that's
not quite doubled, but tell me about that too. Like, what's the effect been on that for recruitment?
In years past, we would recruit people, or we would, talk to people about coming to work with us, and they'd say, "Hey, what's the name of your business?" We'd say Air Source America. And they would kind of like turn their head like, "Well, where are you located?" Because they didn't really know who we were.
Yeah.
And we would really have to sell it really hard. Like, "Oh no, listen, we're really good at this. We get great reviews. We've got good benefits." And it's like, we were really having to explain ourselves, to try and get somebody to consider us for, as an employer. And that same thing's true with customers as well. But this past year, people were coming to us and they were saying, "Hey, man, I see these trucks everywhere, and I Googled you guys, and I'm really interested in coming to work here." And as a matter of fact, we had a guy that came on board last year, midsummer, and he came from a large company in town, and he called me. He said, "Hey, I know somebody that knows you, and I hear it's cooler with Buehler." And he started laughing, and I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, it is." And he really opened my eyes to the fact that, when people notice your brand from an employment standpoint, they're more interested in coming to work for you as well. And since then, it's just been a lot easier to talk to people because they know who we are. And when you're a known brand, people want to work there. And that translates with customers as well. When I am sitting down to try and sell somebody an air conditioning system, they literally take what we have to say a lot more seriously because they see our trucks everywhere, and they're like, "Well, this company's got great reviews. I see their trucks everywhere. I trust this company a lot more than a company that they've never heard of."
Yeah. And that goes to the point too, as far as, we always say we can do as much as we can to form that initial impression that consumer has about your brand, right? So we're all about trying to control that impression, trying to make sure that they feel something about your company before they really know you. So before you ring that doorbell, we're trying to control those impressions and those takeaways. But when you ring that doorbell and you perform that service, that's on you guys. So the crazy thing about what you guys do and have done is I looked up online before, 427 5-star Google reviews. 5-star. Like, I think there is none other than 5-star. So like, the level of service that you guys provide and that commitment to excellence is also something that the brand espouses, so that you can't have this great brand and then a poor service. It's never going to work long term. It may get them in the door, but you can't build on that. But like, you've invested so much on making sure that the values of your company are such that we will do the right thing no matter what. And you just don't see that. And I think that's part of also why you've gained so much more momentum. So when we talk about momentum, so year one revenue, I think, was up, like 23%, something like that?
Yeah, we were up 23% for the year of 2019.
Okay.
And you got to remember that the rebrand, although we started it in February, we didn't get the real traction of the rebrand for a couple of months,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but we considered that a big win, being up 23% in a very, very competitive market. Jacksonville, Florida is extremely competitive air conditioning market. But in addition to that, we didn't spend any more money in 2019 than we did in 2018. We just got so much more effective with what we were doing with the spend.
Right.
And there were, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I've told them to you before, but we added a little over 900 new customers in 2019, brand new customers. And I mean, that for us, that was a really, really big deal.
Yeah.
The prior year, we added less than 500 new customers, same exact money spent, twice as much effectiveness.
Wow. That's crazy. And then you mentioned to me when we were talking before we started this, even just looking at March numbers, as far as revenue is concerned, like how much more you guys did this March, which you would think you start seeing the effects of the COVID-19 issues and things like that. But like, just compare March to March and like, what were the numbers there?
So March 2019, we did $212,000 in total revenue. In March 2020, we did $504,000 in revenue. So more than double.
Wow.
And April, even though we're not like, super, super excited about how April's going because of everything that's going on. We're still going to blow out last year's April.
Yeah.
And again, we're not spending any more money this year than we did last year. It's just the brand has a lot of traction. And my CSRs, when they answer the phone, they hear two things. I heard you, or the first thing they always hear is, "Hey, I saw your truck in my neighborhood, and then I Googled you." And man, I thought, gosh, I can't mess this up. I've got to call them. And another thing they'll tell us is, we heard you on the radio, and then we Googled you. So we know that people are remembering the name when they hear it, and they're remembering the brand when they see it. And the traction of that. And, I've also studied a lot of the cases that you guys have had. I want to say it was Hansen said that in his second year is when he really, really noticed the explosion in growth, because he had that whole first year to get his brand really associated with his marketplace. And I know he's a fantastic story of growth. And like I've always told you, we want to be one of those great stories as well. And I think that we're on our way.
Well, I mean, definitely looking at the March numbers by itself, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it's just awesome to hear. So listen, to finish it off, there's so many people that get to the point where they've got this measure of success. It's maybe incremental in their growth pattern, and they sort of feel like, why change it? Why sort of fix something that is technically, I guess, not broke? Like, what would you say to those folks that are kind of, on the fence about whether or not this makes sense for them? I know every situation is gonna be a little bit different, but there's plenty of people that are having maybe incremental growth. Maybe they've been flat for many years too, but like, they're not sure about this. Cause you went through that whole process yourself of having to wrap your head around wanting to do this.
Absolutely. If they're looking at Kick Charge, they know that they know the reason why. If they're on your website, if they're looking at your information, they're thinking to themselves, I could probably do a lot better with my brand. What normally stops people is the fear of change. And it really had a hold of me for a little while through that process. My confidence led me to hire you, but my fear is what was holding me up in that process. But it's on the other side of fear is where real success will take place. And for those customers, for those people that are considering it, they have to get past that fear. They got to get past it because the results are in. If you've got a memorable brand, if you have a really good plan and you're working with the right people, you can have just unbelievable success. But you got to trust the process. You got to trust the experts. You got to read the bios and believe that there's a good reason why you're hiring those people.
Awesome. Well, listen, we've got a bunch of people here that if anybody really wants to ask any questions, you could just unmute yourself or post it in the chat if you want to ask any questions. In case anybody is wondering anything specific that I didn't cover, guys feel free to just, I think you could do in the chat if anybody has questions. Anybody? Nobody questions? All right. Well, listen, brother, thanks so much for taking the time today. I know it's obviously a crazy time, but I appreciate spending some time and just walking everyone through the process. I think this is really good for people to hear that are kind of on the fence about whether or not this makes sense for them. Definitely one of the most proud brands that we have and that we're most proud of, I think, and certainly working with you has been so much fun. I think that's the one thing I just enjoyed working with you is I think, we had a lot of fun just doing it. And I certainly appreciate the friendship that we've developed over the time. And it's just so great to see the success that you're experiencing and to know, listen, you created 5 or 6 jobs in a year, and for us, that means a lot, and to help you be successful and be a part of that story, we're super proud and super grateful for that opportunity. So anyway, bro, listen, you be good. Thanks everybody for tuning in today and listening in, and have a great day.
Thanks, man. Thank you a bunch.
Take care.